Well, Jeff, how are you doing today?
Still alive, man. I used to say prior to the pandemic that I was either upright and breathing or vertical and ventilated. And, since the pandemic hit, those things just aren't as cool to say. So I say, I'm still alive.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I love that. I love that. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I know you've been quite busy lately. You just raised a big round, a lot going on. Very exciting. Um, do you mind giving us just kind of a brief bio and some of the big ideas you're interested in?
Yeah, brief bio. Sixth generation Texan, grew up on a farm, got out of there fairly quick and went through a career in Silicon Valley and then went into academia, became a professor in environmental
Nice.
science. And then what really changed my life was one day I got an idea that I wanted to live in a 33 square foot trash can
I love
for a
that.
year to sort of consume 1% the energy and water and live in 1% the volume. And then that led to me leaving academia, running a startup that was a housing prefab startup, and then now running Jupe.
I love that. And how did you first get interested in kind of like you know, this aspect of like habitats for humans and how it could be different in the future?
Yeah, the first time that I probably thought about this was during my postdoc, which was based in Boston at the Harvard School of Public Health. I spent time in West Africa,
Oh, very cool.
in Ghana, and we were sort of start studying in the poorest areas of Accra, um, exposure to air quality, or exposure to lack of air quality. Folks stirring over these big pots all day while
Oh
they were
God, yeah.
cooking with wood or coal, and just got to see firsthand, some of the way living conditions were outside of the U.S. Again, thinking about it then, went all the way through to really, these are the kind of things you think about when you're lying in a dumpster, staring up at the stars at night, that, hey, housing's kind of fucked. Can we do something about it? And really, even going back to like just thinking about Maslow's pyramid, right? If people still even look at boomer
Yeah.
things like this. Um, if you're taking food, clothing, and shelter, right, food is a distribution problem. There's a
Right.
lot of really, let's just say, folks with a healthy amount of gravitational pull of
Yes.
mass in Texas, and other places in the world they don't have a lot of food. Clothing's pretty solved, but shelter is just absolutely fucked, right?
Right.
Like there's 1.5 billion people on the planet that don't have adequate shelter. And even if you think about like this office I'm in, even the quote well-designed spaces,
Yeah.
the one you're in, that we just think about them as being comfortable.
Right.
Nobody thinks about them as being absolutely delightful. And so it's one of the things we're trying to do in Jupe is provide like a level of delight within an experience. And so that's really the push the next level thing that we're working on.
Got it. Got it. So there's like a developing world version of this. There's kind of a developed world, and these are distinctions, like whatever. But I think you understand what I'm kind of getting at. And if we look at just America, right? Housing prices are up 30% year over year. It's just this bananas thing that it just keeps going up and up and up. I think mortgages as a percentage of the loans banks give has quadrupled since 1980. It's like this just housing just gets more and more expensive every year, and there's just kind of no end in sight. It's like, what are we going to do about this? Do you see Jupe as taking some of the pressure off of that for, Americans and people in the West where housing prices have just gotten completely out of control?
Yeah, I think it needs to be a almost catastrophic like leap off of the tracks.
Yeah.
So if you look at how we've been doing things, there's this book Sapiens. Have you
Yeah.
read it?
I have
I
not.
trace I trace this all the way back to this guy talks about how a lot of what we have in the modern day that is painful actually came from when we first decided to settle down and sort of take care of this thing called wheat
Right.
in about 12,000 years ago. And so what did we start doing? We stopped roaming. We started accumulating more possessions. We
Yeah.
started putting up walls. We started, taking care of animals. I think the institution of marriage was probably invented around there. Um, all of these things since then, when you look at housing, it kind of evolved in not really that much of a different state. And in my opinion, a lot of that has to do with us arguing over a little postage stamp of land in these areas that have also evolved from that time, especially since industrial revolution, called cities, to where it's one piece of land connected to a fixed grid, right, in one specific space of which you're tied to for 30 years.
Right.
Like, what else is like this? Plus, all of your wealth gets thrown into this, which it's not exactly a liquid asset. So if you look at all the progress, right, then of building technology, the biggest innovations in the last 50 years in housing and in construction are probably the nail gun, which may go back to the 30s or 40s, and the pre-assembled truss. Nothing
I say,
else has really made a massive, dent. I mean, there are other things like concrete pump trucks and things, but it hadn't changed the game. And so what I'm thinking about is we need to take almost a decentralized, right, viewpoint, as we are in many other things in the
right.
current day, right, towards housing. Why be connected to one piece of land? And why be tethered to this 30-year mortgage and this extremely harmful, mostly petrochemical backed grid of
Yep.
electrical and water, right? So Jupe wants to detach us, cut that chain that ties us to a particular piece of land and sever the connections to the grid such that we've got a new way of living, right? Not a way of incrementally advancing the march of real estate as it's existed.
I love that. Do you have any theorizing as to why housing has been so resistant to innovation?
I do. I have a model for this. So let's take a leap in innovation around, let's call it electric vehicles, right? Let's
Yeah.
take Tesla. So when you're building out a company like Tesla to completely make a quantum leap, right, off of
Right.
fossil fuels, there are a couple of elements of things that I can talk about later. In some ways, Jupe's kind of a combination of Tesla and Airbnb in its current incarnation. But you have almost like a puzzle you're trying to solve for, right?
Yeah.
A single plane. And you're moving around different sort of subsets of that problem set, right? Which may largely be engineering, maybe some light regulatory stuff, supply chains. These things kind of exist,
Yeah.
right? And you can see them. When you're talking about housing, it becomes at least a Rubik's Cube, right? And let me explain that. You're not just solving the puzzle for, say, construction technology. Oh, we've got 3D printing, or we've got modular housing,
Right.
or we've got this new type of panel that integrates in electricity. You then, when you start to build a 3D printed home, you have to now look over here at the financing arm. Now a bank,
Got
Wells
it.
Fargo, is going to say, I'm not going to finance that. I don't even know how a 3D printed home works. Then turn the corner again, and you have a construction industry that doesn't understand it, and the labor doesn't exist. Then turn the corner again, and you have a different regulatory setup and coding and zoning setup in every single city. Palo Alto's is different from San Jose's, right?
Jesus. Yeah.
And then last, I'll turn one more corner, the fucking craziest one on the dark side of the moon, on the dark side of the Rubik's Cube. Elon doesn't have, when you park your Tesla in a driveway, the neighbor saying, hey,
I hate
not in
that.
my
Right.
backyard. I don't like the color of your Tesla. Therefore, I'm going to initiate a vote that says you can't park your Tesla in that driveway. So you think about all of those things, plus they talk about hardware being hard and atoms harder than bits. You're talking about the heaviest asset class that's also mired in, forget about the mob and garbage, right? Disposal. You're talking about the oldest families and the oldest way to transfer wealth over generations. The way the Kushners transfer wealth is through real estate. So think about all of those fucking forces within the system. And it's why Jupe has said, we're going to design something light, nimble, and we're going deep into the forest to sort of build this army before we come back, right? So I'm not getting anywhere close to cities right now.
Right.
We're going to go build, we're going to go out to the deep forests of New Zealand, figure out the system, and then come back and try to solve these problems in the cities, if people even stay in cities.
Right. That's a big question, right? With COVID, it has this broken the back of the mega cities. They're kind of monopoly on all these network effects and things. And it's my belief, I think it has to some extent.
Right. I mean, I'm in Austin. Joe Rogan's here now. Elon's here. What's his name? Friedman. Lex Friedman's here, yeah. Right? Who else would you want to hang out with, right? But exactly. those guys.
The whole crew is here.
So this Austin was, for a long time considered a second-tier system, and COVID broke that. Another thing that's unique between Austin and San Francisco, LA, and New York, those cities are going to face a significant little problem when sea levels start rising, right? And I don't know, we're maybe 300 feet above sea level or so here in Austin, so it'll be a little longer. But what are we going to do about housing? Are we going to just keep, building walls and moving the housing in further? Or are we going to build a whole new decentralized kind of system? What Gary Tan, my main backer, coined as universal autonomous housing, which I think is a great term.
I love that. That's such a great term. Could you talk, just for the listener who might not have heard of Jupe, and I guess they're, probably walking their dog or something, listening to the podcast. Can you help visualize, what a Jupe is and kind of what makes it special?
Yeah. So Jupe is on first glance a little spaceship. And actually, I tell people, it's actually a really good deal for us to land our spaceship on your property and we'll split the revenue. Right. So it was designed by industrial designers from places like Tesla and drone designers, not by architects as most structures traditionally are. And then the system by which we moved Jupe was inspired by the skateboard chassis at Rivian. So we flat pack down an entire volume of a house so that we don't ship air. So on the same truck that you might ship a one volumetric unit, we can ship 12 or 15 Jupes to a site and then pop them up as living units in about an hour and a half each, completely off grid, right? So right now our MVP is just good for really one night of sleeping in this beautiful spaceship with Baltic birch floors and Trek lighting and off-grid power. And we will build out the systems to eventually have a village on a truck, right? Or a city on a ship, really.
That is, it's super cool. And they look
There's
awesome.
one behind me. If you do happen to want to go subscribe, smash that subscription button. There is a picture of our bling unit above Los Angeles behind me that really looks spaceshipy, has all these LEDs and shit on it. So
it's very cool. It's very cool. Well, Jeff, how has the journey been so far, building Jupe? Has it been harder than you thought? Has it been easier than you thought?
Well, so I had one shit show hardware startup already. I'm hoping not to have another one, but even so, I'm going to just say anybody that's looking at starting a startup in one of the hardest to move the needle on industries, don't start it on April 1st, 2020, at the very front end of a up and to the right thing called the pandemic. So that's added when building a physical product, an entire new thing to the mix. We did try to solve for some things though that we didn't in our last startup. That by getting to revenue a lot quicker than
Yeah.
maybe even the product was really ready, and building a product where frankly we gave no fucks when we dropped these things in Los Angeles and rented them initially. It was completely illegal, right? They're gone now. Anybody looking for our units, I'm sorry, they're gone.
Right.
But yeah, it's really difficult building a physical thing. And forget about a speaker you can hold in your hand, right?
Right.
These things are 8.5 feet by 13 feet wide, and they weigh 1,100 pounds. So I think like we were really smart about getting these things into the world, getting users in them, asking the users what they thought, and selling a few at a margin. I think we had the most revenue of any of the 400 companies or so in the batch at Y
Sweet.
Combinator, right? Which, I mean, revenue that early is one thing. Maybe that's not worth bragging about, but look, we were in the last batch of Y Combinator, and we just started the company in April of 2020. So for getting a hard tech product to market, I think we did a pretty good job. So getting a product to market that you've got some margins on. If we sell 20 Jupes right now a month, sell them, which we're not doing much anymore.
Yeah.
We've got a new program. We're, as Paul Graham would say, default alive. So
It's very good.
that's good, a good place to be at.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it protects your downside and it gives you a lot more flexibility.
Right.
What's the plan going forward? Like what's your strategy? I don't know how much you want to talk about this. Like it's oftentimes good to have these
Look,
internal,
you
but
know, this is where all the comparisons probably end. But I think when Elon was asked about this in an interview about, hey, what about all these, Tesla killers and electric car makers? Look, I'm in the same situation. I want the problem solved.
right, that's
Right.
what's
I think I
important.
can do it better than anyone else, but if somebody else does it better,
That's
great.
very good.
And there's also 1.5 billion people that need housing. It's a pretty good market. It's a pretty big
It's
market. I don't think
exactly.
anyone's going to gobble it up. If we get 1% of the market, I think we'll have a market cap somewhere similar to like Apple, right? If
Right.
we get 1%. So I have no problem talking about that. Look, we now have a unit that is good for one night, right? We're developing out our toilet prototype right now, which is, by the way, going to be fucking awesome. It's going to be mind blowing. I won't show you that yet, but
Yeah.
it will be the greatest experience the bear shitting in the woods has ever had.
I love that.
I'll just put it that way. You probably have never shitted in I'll just put it this way, marble laden toilet in the middle of the woods.
Probably not.
So what we've got to do is create that magical experience out a little bit at a time. So right now you can stay one night. Jupes are magical. I've had most people that stay there say it's the greatest night of sleep they've had in their life, right?
Very
And there
cool.
are some design elements to that I can talk about. But taking that delightful experience and moving it from one night to then two, having the greatest shit in the woods that you've ever had, and maybe the greatest shit ever, then moving to what does a weekend look like? Let's add an off-grid sauna to that. And then what does a week look like? Let's add Starlink in a Zoom
Yeah.
room, Jupe, right? To where you can actually do a podcast or a
Work.
call
Yeah.
like this. And then beginning to add kitchens, vertical gardens, right? So pretty soon you do have an entire village that sets up anywhere on the planet, right? With pretty good weather right now. We
Yeah.
haven't weatherized them yet. And in a day, right? I mean, that is a pretty insane proposition. As we move forward, we want to start developing a fleet of Jupes that we then can deploy. If there's a wildfire in Paradise, right, Northern California, we can pick up these Jupes and get them in a day, thousands of them, right, to wildfire victims, place them in their backyards and allow them to watch as their house gets rebuilt. right? Pick them up and take them to Burning Man for a few days, then pick them up and take them to New Orleans for where a hurricane is hit, right? Like have a crypto conference in the middle of North Dakota in the summer on a raw, beautiful piece of land. So we want to move and then towards this model that Gary called universal autonomous housing, to where we can provide a dynamic supply for living, a really delightful living experience to wherever the area of highest need or highest sort of nightly rate is, and then begin to integrate in some serious tech from all the way to when Web 1 was created to an NFT platform that we will now probably launch second quarter.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and do you see like kind of the development of Jupe kind of going like Tesla, where you have the Roadster, and so you kind of hit the ultra top end first. You kind of establish like some kind of robust market there, big market share, and then you kind of move out a little bit, and then it's like the Model S, and then it's everybody who wants a 5 Series, and then
like the market for our model, our Roadster is a lot bigger than the Roadster market, right? Glamping is about a $5 billion industry, and it's growing at 20%. So there's $1 billion in value added every year. And the largest glamping company in the world has like 400 or 500 units.
Oh, wow.
That's it. Right. Wow. So it's completely fragmented. So it's a great Roadster market, and it allows us to begin to dial in that experience to that magic you feel in driving a Tesla exists in no home environment. Right. You don't get that in indoor environments. So that's what we want to leverage the tech into doing, not just through design, but to saying this was not just kind of, a cool designed Airbnb that I stayed in that was really comfortable. It was fucking awesome.
Like it was a really good time.
And we need to make fucking awesome experiences now and then translate that down to a Model 3 with different business models. And I've always wanted to solve the big problem, but I was talking to the guy that started Architecture for Humanity, cool. Won the TED Prize between Bono and Clinton for this, and talking to him early about Jupe, about wanting to solve these refugee crises and various things. And he said, don't try to start there. Elon would be dead if he would have tried to start with the Model 3, right? Yeah. Start with something, and I think he was then head of humanitarian efforts at Airbnb. Start with something that is more a Roadster. Example, Exhibit A, there are 10,000 refugee shelters right now sitting in a warehouse outside of Stockholm.
Oh, God.
And that was IKEA's attempt, right, to solve that refugee, even with all of the logistics, flat packing, manufacturing, and just raw force of IKEA.
Yeah.
They failed in their attempt to provide refugee housing, right? A little startup building, a wooden frame in a SpaceX guy's garage in Hawthorne, isn't going to be able to solve the refugee crisis with the same strategy.
Right. That does make sense. Have you looked and like tried to diagnose what, and it's like a lot of different things, but like what went wrong with like the IKEA example? Do you know, is it just like doesn't have real product market fit or something?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, it was going back to that Rubik's Cube, not solving and understanding some of the dynamics. I didn't even talk about the politics, right? Oh, yeah. Of that Rubik's Cube. It ends up being a D&D gaming die, right? In the end, like a 42 sided, 42 is an excellent number, by the way. They had some safety issues that were called out with the units collapsing, or maybe they caught on fire or something like this. And the political system that you enter when you're starting to work through the UN
Right.
or you're starting to work through the WHO, and then you're literally just dead, right? How are
Yep.
you going to go back reputationally after you've had a couple of these incidents with folks that are already have had a pretty hard time and a pretty
Right.
hard life? And that's what I want to give those folks: dignity, right? Like, not a mud floor
Right.
and eighth inch plastic,
Yeah.
right? Eighth or 16th of an inch plastic between them and the elements.
Yep.
I want them to have a not just a comfortable night of sleep, but why shouldn't they have a truly, I don't want to call it joyous, but a truly exceptional and awesome night of sleep?
Right. There's no reason that that shouldn't be accessible as well. Uh, do you have the sense that American houses are just too big? Do we just have too much of a preference for them? You've lived in smaller spaces
Yeah.
before.
I am going to start the answer with an acknowledgement of my living in small spaces. I lived in a 33 square foot
Wow.
dumpster for a year that was 6 foot by 5.5 foot footprint, and I'm 6'1". So I
Lordy.
still, my girlfriend has told me that I, for some reason, turned diagonally in the middle of the night. And we finally figured out was I was so used to sleeping diagonally in the dumpster that I have some sort of muscle memory from it. So, and then the last place that I lived, or the next place after that, was a 350 square foot casita. And now I've designed a 111 square foot, very comfortable living structure in Jupe. That, by the way, the Jupes can be combined to create much larger structures, right? By
Gotcha.
the time you have 8 Jupes clicked together like Legos, you've got 1,000, nearly 1,000 square foot structure. So, I don't like to get on a preachy pulpit about
Yeah.
your house is too big, right? You can get in a lot of trouble there, but
Yeah.
I think when you're talking about efficiency of space, I do
Right.
think they're very inefficient in terms of, using space. The dining room is just probably the most ridiculous, right, room in the house that nobody ever goes to, right?
Right.
Like, anymore. Like, it's a remnant of the 50s when dad would come home with his lunchbox at 5:13 every
Yep.
day, and the family would sit down for, as we call it in Texas, supper.
Yep. It's time.
um, and then there are just weird things with how hallways are designed, extra bedrooms. A lot of that space could just be used much more efficiently. And in multiple kind of use cases. But let's just talk about inefficiency in how the whole house is built,
Right.
right? It's really optimized for cost and labor efficiency, really,
Gotcha.
right? I have something that I call the Home Depot parking lot test. And so if you've stick built a house, which means using normal 2x4s,
Yeah.
and you're putting up drywall and painting, you can go pick up a couple of guys in the Home Depot parking lot that
Yeah.
can do a lot of those jobs, right? If you have these structural insulated panels or a 3D printed house or anything out of
Yeah.
the ordinary that those 3 guys in the Home Depot parking lot can't understand or fix, you're going to run into a problem, right?
Got it.
And it's going to stop your whole construction process if you don't have the laborers and people don't show up that day. But literally everything from pouring the foundation and framing that up to putting the roof on, unless it's a specialized trade, those guys can do that.
Right.
Right. And so that's another form of the kind of inefficiency of, to get back to your question, it's not as much of the houses just being too big. They're way too inefficient in every way.
Got it. Got it. It's just like it's too expensive to deviate from the norm in these other ways. It just gets really
Yeah.
difficult.
And I mean, I'm literally sitting in an office with my co-founder from Casita across the way. He now builds single family homes here in Austin. He builds some of the biggest homes in the city. And he knows these same things. I mean, he was literally a co-founder of a prefab modular housing
Yeah.
startup, and we tried to change housing that way, and ultimately couldn't move the needle and ran out of money.
It's tough. It's a tough challenge. It's a very tough challenge. How much do jupes cost to produce? I don't know if you can talk about that, but
Yeah,
I'm
I can't
curious.
talk about that a lot. I can talk about how efficient we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're able, so Casita, my last startup, which was a typical modular housing startup that we built a factory house and shipped it out and
Yeah.
dropped it in a backyard. That took us about 30 days with probably 15 people. I can build a Jupe in 4 hours with two
Wow.
people.
Wow. So it's much more efficient.
And we will get more efficient than making cars at that. Eventually, my co-founder pushed an Escalade out the door at a factory every 57 seconds. So, when I'm talking this crazy talk about building hundreds of thousands or millions of homes,
Yeah.
it's completely doable. And there's a complete market. It's right. It's getting between A and B. So we sold Jupes anywhere from about $20,000 to $25,000, depending on the options.
Gotcha.
We're no longer selling them. What we're doing now is looking at all this gorgeous land across the United States that is not used and saying, do you have a piece of land? Great. Let's look at it. And if it's going to meet our sort of requirements, we will give you Jupes, no cost up front. And you essentially pay us a licensing fee and split the revenue.
Very cool.
So that creates for the landowner no upfront cost, and
Right.
maybe they don't even ever have to show up at their land, right? They just go onto our booking platform and it generates revenue. And it's also great for us because it's more of a SaaS type revenue stream, right?
Right.
We now have a recurring revenue stream for the 7 years of that Jupe. We're generating recurring revenue that's fairly predictable. It also gives us control over the product and brand, whereas part of that licensing program, when the Jupe starts getting old or when the Model S comes out,
Right.
right? We can go actually hot swap out your Roadster that's now 5 years old or 3 years old for the very latest 2022, right, Model S Plaid,
And you go
if you
upgrade it.
will. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really good.
we'll upgrade it again, no cost to the landowner. And it also gives us the ability to shift the fleet around, right? If your piece of land is really spiking in the summer in Southern California, there's another piece of land we have them on in North Dakota or in Montana, we can shift that fleet so that you can increase your revenue stream. It's completely dynamic. If the mayor of New Orleans then calls and says, I need 10,000 Jupes down here, there's a hurricane coming in the Gulf, we can shift the fleet to meet his need, right?
Very cool.
His or her need.
I love that, and that gives you a lot of modularity in like how you meet demand. What does it take to get so you can flat pack them? How many can you put on like a semi, and then you need like a forklift to get them off? What does that process kind of look like?
Yeah, it's also become very simple to ship a Casita, a typical prefab unit that we had across Austin. It required two big cranes to lift 40,000 pounds on both sides, get it onto a double drop low boy 18-wheeler with a specialized driver that required shutting down streets. That was the process, and it cost $15,000.
Jeez.
I tried to shift in the right direction by an order of magnitude every single process and the logistics and costs of a Jupe relative to most of the other products out there. So we can get 12 Jupes on and off a truck with a forklift and literally with one person. get them across that same distance for not 15,000 a unit, but about $150 a unit.
Wow.
So that efficiency, and eventually we'll have robotics that are able to load, unload, and maybe even pop these things up with a button to where an autonomous truck drive, an autonomous truck could get these to a location. They could get on and off the truck with robotics and literally set up a hotel or maybe even a village with no humans, right?
That's amazing.
That's kind of fucking crazy to think about. But the technology is either all out there or on the roadmap right now to be able to do that. It could be one of these things in technology where you probably know who said this, but it was something around either, the technology in science fiction. And I'm not quoting anywhere near this. I'm probably butchering 4 or 5, but the general concept is that the technology you might see in science fiction or one of these visions is either not going to ever happen, or it's going to happen way, way faster than anybody ever expected. Right.
That's right.
And who knows? Maybe we'll never offload a Jupe with a drone and robot and set it up from somewhere in Nevada by pushing a button, or it will happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's so cool. I really love that vision. I've got a question, and it's been on the notes. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but I love to ask this question to entrepreneurs because you get a lot of information on this. Will you be successful with Jupe?
It is a fantastic question. And very honestly, I don't know, but I do believe enough to work 16-hour days every day for the rest of my life on it. And I think we have a team that believes in a similar fashion. There is no first principle prohibiting us from doing it.
Yeah.
And generally, when there is not a first principle that doesn't prohibit something, then it is doable. And I believe we can do it. We have a team of people that have failures in their past.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. I actually like to hire folks that have gotten up, brushed themselves off, and that have learned from those past failures and applied them to what we're trying to do now. So look, I mean, we're default alive, as
That's
Paul
really
Graham
good.
would say, right? By just selling 20 Jupes. We still sell 20 a month to cover our burn. We are going to do everything in our power and, in our ability to grind to find the people to help us do that. That's the biggest question mark.
Yeah.
The biggest question mark in this whole thing is, can I get the right people onto the train? Really, the funding, if we do that, we will get funded. We will continue to be funded. We will continue to build things out, but it will be about the talent ultimately.
That's a really good answer. And yeah, you've proven your capability to default alive. You've got funding from top tier firm, Initialize, Gary Tan. I'm curious, what as much as I can help, with my small podcast here, what are you looking for? Like, what are the skills you need, and what can we try and help source for you so Jupe can be successful on the talent side?
Absolutely. The number one thing we're looking for right now is technical talent. And at the top of that list, a CTO.
Gotcha.
And a CTO that understands software, but also understands integration into human experience, right? Into the atomic aspect of that. That's going to help us build that delight on the user side, but also things like robotics and self-driving cars. I mean, the folks I'm interviewing right now for that position have built VR type glasses, right, that integrate with the software needed to do that. They have built self-driving cars, right? They built drones. So folks that either have a lot of interest in that and have done that and have built teams, because that person and myself are then going to have to go out and find an absolute kick-ass team
Right.
to execute on this vision. And I would like to transition that, if it's okay, into the technology aspect of this, because people will look at it and say, this guy's got a tent, a lit up tent. What the fuck is he even thinking, like, of needing a CTO, right? Well, if you think about Jupe, it doesn't have anything to do with the actual tent. It has to do with that chassis product underneath it that currently acts as a foundation and has some inverters and, you know, a little bit of IoT and some batteries in it, some solar panels.
Yeah.
It is an awesome experience for one night,
but
we can't make it awesome for too much longer and delightful without technology. So you should be able to not only book into a Jupe on an app, but show up at the site and have it detect your location and pulse when you're there. As you approach the Jupe, you should get a notification that the last time someone that was in that Jupe was 14 hours ago. So you know somebody hadn't crept into it, right? There should be a locking mechanism on the outside. When you go in, your Spotify should click on automatically. You should open up the fridge and the floor and find your dark chocolate peanut butter cups and Japanese whiskey in the fridge that it knew you liked, that's been delivered, right? You should lay down and have the right frequency of white noise come in, right? That the unit has learned that you appreciate. Maybe there's even haptics in the bed at some point that help you to sleep better, that are tuned to you, right? You should then eventually be able to drop a pin anywhere on the planet and select a date range for when you want to go there. Have your friends notified, right? Where have you always wanted to go? Well,
oh man, probably North Dakota. North Dakota.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I've never been to North Dakota.
Is it Black Hills there?
Yeah.
Or is it South Dakota?
Well, something like that.
Let's say you want to go to the Black Hills, right? Yeah. And you've been on the Jupe platform for a while. You absolutely love it. There's bathrooms now and Zoom rooms connected to Starlink. You love it that your dark chocolate peanut butter cups are there every time. And so you say, you know what? I'm just going to drop a pin at the Black Hills on the app, the Jupe app. And then I'm going to select 20 of my homies that I want to be there with me next July.
Yeah.
And let's say 10 of them accept. That triggers a back-end system where we go find the piece of land, right, from a landowner in that area, make them an offer of $1,000 for that month that they're going to earn, and they have to do nothing but give us access to the land. Those Jupes are deployed there. Maybe you say, I want a sauna, we want a hot tub, right? And we want a large, community room to be delivered as well. You get booked a ticket, an Uber from the airport, you show up, all your friends are there in a place that was raw prairie a couple of days before, right? So these are the kind of things that we need to enable that will all be enabled through technology. We're now working on things from the very earliest parts of the internet integrated into NFT platforms of fractionalizing land and fractionalizing Jupe assets, right? Such that we can form whole new ways of community through Web3 that have never been imaginable or possible before. I know how to articulate that vision between where we are, a tent, and there. I know fuck all. But I know fuck all. And I have some very good people on our team that know how to evaluate the technology aspect of this and bringing in that CTO, like Austin Allred, the founder of Lambda Schools, one of our investors, and will undoubtedly help us sort of screen and vet and find this person. Plus Gary Tan, who in my opinion is made the first bet on Coinbase and was one of the greatest seed investors in the world. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do, and
That's,
that's why we need a CTO and technology folks.
I love it.
I think we got, rather than just an ad for a CTO there, we got some of the kind of vision out there on why we
Yeah,
need that, right?
absolutely. No,
Yeah,
I think that was really excellent. I have some people in mind. I'll make sure I connect you with them. And if
fantastic.
anyone's listening, how should they connect with you? And they're like, I've
Um,
got the skill set.
I'm on Twitter at Prof Dumpster, PROF Dumpster.
Love it.
I went by Professor Dumpster. Haven't been able to drop the Twitter handle. Also, my direct email is the letter J at jupe.com. There's also a lever form. I'd encourage people to go to the website and click careers, because we talk about the crypto wallet that we give people at Jupe as part of their 401k. We
Nice.
talk about the train trip through the night that you go out to this cool place called Marfa, Texas. Actually, Art Blocks, I think, just bought a house there.
Oh, cool.
And some of the other kind of cool things, working with the team and the culture at Jupe that we're trying to make unique. If you don't hit your OKRs quarterly, you sleep in a dumpster in the middle of the desert and heat. I'm kidding.
I love it. I love it. I love a little incentive.
So yeah, I should, on top of that, so I should say how the name Jupe came about.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious.
Because somebody just asked me in an interview earlier today, and it's kind of a funny story. The company was called Simple Structures,
Oh,
actually.
cool.
I think that, and then Foundation. So Foundation was when we applied to Y Combinator the first time, we were actually going to just make the foundation product
Oh, really?
that the Jupe sits on, right? Foundations that were integrated with all the guts of a home. And it was a decent idea, but Y Combinator rejected it, which I don't think it was actually probably nearly as good an idea as Jupe. So when we got our first little round of funding after this, we all went to dinner. And my girlfriend at the time said, "Hey guys, I've been thinking about something. Elon is kind of a lazy son of a bitch." And everybody kind of drops their forks and looks over. She goes, guy really needs to get a little bit more ambition. And we're like,
Whoa.
interplanetary species, putting cyborgs, chips and brains,
Yeah.
and bringing the world off of fossil fuels. The guy's thinking pretty big. And she said, yeah, I just think he could go a little bigger. And we're like, explain. She said, if he went one more planet to Jupiter, he would probably get like a 400x on surface area. Never mind it's a gas giant, but it's way bigger than Mars. He's kind of being lazy just going to Mars,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
it's a bigger market out there. She was like, you guys should just name your company some ridiculous fucking Silicon Valley name like Zooks or Jewel or Uber. She said, you should just call it Jupe. And we were like, that is the most ridiculous thing ever. No fucking way. And we kept joking about it. And then I looked up jupe.com, who owned it, and wrote the guy and said, hey, we're working on housing. And he said, you know what? 4 letters, spellable URL. This thing's worth 50, 100 grand. But I work on affordable housing too.
No way.
I love what you guys are doing.
No,
so here is, I don't know, we paid $5,000 or something for it in the end. I said, sign from the heavens, or at least from the planets.
From Jupiter.
We are now Jupe.
I love that. That is such a great story.
And I have actually then a funny side story. I said, you know what? I'm going to calculate how lazy he is. And I have the receipt from, I can send you a picture of it, from that night at the restaurant, where I'm drawing these radiuses and, 4 pi r squared is the surface area of a planet. It's like an order of magnitude off, but it is still bigger. And Elon, according to my girlfriend, will still call him lazy.
I love it. I love it. I love that. That is so cool. That's a great story. That is a great story. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really enjoyed talking to you about Jupe. I think we hit where we want to send people, but is it jupe.com? Is that the place to go?
Jupe.com, or hit me up, j@jupe.com on email, or on Twitter @Prof Dumpster.
Super. Sounds great. Well, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Will.